Good afternoon, everyone on the East Coast and folks watching overseas as well as on the West Coast. Good late morning to you. We just had another little aftershock here in New Jersey. If you're not familiar, we had some earthquakes on Friday, and looks like it's not done with us yet, but everything is fine and okay. So welcome again to LinkedIn Live, also simulcast on YouTube. And today we're going to take a little bit of a different angle on our discussion with my guest, Anthony Donofrio. The last couple of sessions, we've talked to folks about climate action and inventions related to climate action and patents. Today, we're going to obviously stick with the overall theme of sharing knowledge and learning and hopefully expanding our networks. I'm fortunate to know someone like Anthony. I guess, sometimes when I'm in a room and they go around the table and, might ask, like, what do you do? And I might respond, well, when I grow up, I want to be like Anthony. And once you hear him talk and talk about his career trajectory, you might understand why. But he's done well in life, and now he's doing good. And again, we're going to talk about that path. And when I think of someone like him, it always reminds me of this particular quote from John Adams. For those of you who may have even watched the HBO miniseries many years ago, he whispered into his kids' ears at night, "To be good and to do good is all we have to do," right? And of course, one of the other things that's very common in the ESG space for investment and companies is to do well and to do good. So a slight variation of this same theme, right? And we're going to learn about that from Anthony. As always, this is the way I want to use LinkedIn from now on. Not just to post things, not just to comment on other people's posts, but to share my network that I'm fortunate to have, and to learn from my network as well, and hopefully give you an opportunity to learn as well. Anthony is someone I've known for over 20 years now. And I'm going to bring him on screen and we'll talk a little bit more about our connection and then we'll get into the discussion. So without further ado or delay,
Hello.
Anthony, there you are live.
Hi,
And
Manish.
I was just mentioning how, our connection is over 20 years, almost 25 at this point.
Yeah.
And it largely centered around the Yankees and Red Sox rivalry due to a mutual friend of ours.
Yeah.
But over the course of time, as things have changed around us in the world, our discussions and topics have expanded into other areas. And obviously eventually led us to today in this discussion, which has very little to do with sports other than the fact I'm going to put you on the spot now and ask, do you think the Yankees will be plus 90 by the end of this season?
If I were a betting man, I'd say yes.
Good, good. And I think that's maybe the only risk you might take, because as we'll go through this conversation, one thing we're going to learn about is the cautious approach and methodical approach that you and I think the people you've surrounded yourself with in life have taken to a great deal of success. So why don't we start with just kind of your background, education-wise, because I think we talked about it. I'd love for people to understand career trajectory, especially I know my own kids are going to watch this. At least I know that's two people in the audience, and a few other folks that are probably either rising in high school or rising in college and about to graduate. Will definitely find it interesting to hear your career trajectory. So if you don't mind giving us a little bit of that background.
Sure. Happy to do that. Happy to be with you today. Really an honor and appreciate you having me on. So I went to Villanova University and studied business there. Had a tremendous experience. Loved my time there. Made some lifelong friends and lifelong business connections as well. We've got kind of a strong alumni network, which really my professional career has really served me very well. And hopefully I've reciprocated to a bunch of my Villanova colleagues as well over the years. After I graduated from Villanova's business school, I came back to New Jersey, which is where I'm at now, which is now apparently an earthquake zone, as you pointed out up front. So if you see pictures start to fall off the wall here and I dive under the desk, let's just keep rolling through this, because I'm sure it's just another minor aftershock. But I worked for a couple of years after college in corporate finance at AT&T, and then started to decide, and I'd always assumed I was just going to go get my MBA. But honestly, the more I looked at it, the more I thought, unless I can get into a really top flight MBA program that was largely just going to be a repeat of what I learned and studied at Villanova. And, my GMAT scores told me pretty loudly and clearly, you're not getting into a top flight business program. So I started to think about law school, because I got a couple of lawyers in my family, my older brother and his wife. And they really encouraged me to think about that, because they said, look, you can be a business lawyer. Lawyers aren't just limited to arguing in a courtroom. And you can do a lot of different things with a law degree, and it's a great education. And lo and behold, I took that test, the LSAT, and applied to law schools and got into what I really thought was a good one in Northwestern in Chicago. And that was a transformative experience for me, just in terms of, I was born in New York, but really raised in New Jersey, in Monmouth County, and as a suburban kid. And so you're protected from a lot of things in life. And so, going to a big city in Chicago was an eye-opening experience for me. And it was, and just being at a school like Northwestern, where you had just a lot of brilliant people, highly motivated people. It was really a transformative experience. It was the first time I'd really spent any meaningful time outside of the East Coast. So had a great 3 years there. And then after that, came back to work for big law firms on the East Coast, in the Philadelphia area. It's been a number of years there as a business lawyer, doing transactions, mergers and acquisitions, and private equity. And then decided to move to an in-house legal position, and first came upon a company called BTG, which stands for British Technology Group. Interesting background in that BTG started as an arm of the British government in the 1950s. And it had, I guess the idea was that, so the people who developed penicillin, for instance, had that technology basically stolen from them. It was developed on a university campus. And so the idea was, by the British government, let's make sure that doesn't happen again. And so let's work with, kind of think tanks and people at schools to build up the IP protection of their ideas. And so that operated again as an arm of the British government for about 30 years, and then privatized in the 1980s. And when they did that, they opened an office outside of Philadelphia in the US. And although I was only there for a couple of years, it was a real interesting learning experience. It was kind of like a mini MBA, because they really weren't sure what their business plan was supposed to be. There's still a lot of remnants of like the government culture. So there was a lot of kind of overspending and waste, and not a real clear strategy to building sustainable revenue. Again, the idea was to try to build up intellectual property protection around nascent technology and bring it to commercialization. But the business model was not working. And my role transformed from being a transactional lawyer to being a labor lawyer who was negotiating severance agreements with people that we were firing, kind of in a couple of rounds of layoffs. So I decided I did not want to do that. And the company was going to transform itself into a drug development company, which didn't kind of line up with my skill set. So I then found Hamilton Lane, which was at the time a smallish private equity advisory firm based outside of Philadelphia. there was about 60 people there at the time.
So
And
that brings us right to probably the most important part of your career, at least maybe what you'd consider the heart of the career trajectory, the launching pad. And it's interesting you mentioned your older brother and sister-in-law, who seem to be quite influential in guiding you to a law degree, as opposed to an MBA, which is really, fortunate, right, for you in the sense that you did have that mentorship. And I know that we'll talk a little bit about it later, because that comes into play in what you do today as well for other people who are probably maybe earlier in their career, or maybe not even graduated from college yet. That mentorship part. But of course, that led you, as you mentioned, to this place here. And thank you for sharing these pictures of a great moment in time in your life and the folks at Hamilton Lane. If you could, let's talk about it. Why don't you talk about how it started and how it ended, which actually is a meme that's not always great, but in this particular case, it actually started off really well and it ended in an exceptional way, for you at least, and also I think from what you're described, what's going on currently there. But this is a cool photo of you and the team there ringing the bell as you got listed on the NASDAQ. So let's talk a little bit about that path, and then we'll talk a little bit about the whole idea of IPOs.
Yeah, that brings back some great memories. So I was really fortunate to be part of an organization like Hamilton Lane. As I was saying earlier, when I first met them in 2005, I was just really impressed by not only how smart everyone was who I met with, but also how down to earth they were. And about 2 years before that, in 2003, the chairman had come into the firm along with another group of investors, including Bill Gates. And so having heard that Bill Gates was a minority owner in the company, and having seen the other people that I saw, I thought, this is pretty impressive. There's something here. So I was fortunate enough to be given a job offer. And again, was working as a transactional lawyer, but after a couple of years was asked to also become the chief operating officer of what was then called our co-investment program, and kind of played that dual role throughout my career there. And the company was predicated on a few core principles. One was there's always a customer focus, right? So the CEO led off every company-wide meeting by reminding us that, we're working for the pensioners. The retirement money that we're investing on behalf of these pensions will help. That will help the bricklayers, the nurses, the commercial and food workers live better in retirement. That's our reason for existing, and that was always something that everybody kind of really latched onto and didn't forget, our kind of core purpose. But there was also a lot of it was a culture of respect for people, both internally and externally. But what really fueled the growth was a focus on it, having it be an equity culture, which is to have a pretty broad group of people share in equity of the firm and a shared and carried interest. I think a lot of financial firms, the economics are pretty concentrated amongst a relatively small group of people. But that was where Hamilton Lane was one of the many ways it was unique. And that worked. Establishing that type of a culture made people feel like they were part of something, and that everybody's successes were your own and vice versa. And so that really put us on a trajectory that just went upwards. After the global financial crisis, we navigated that pretty well, and I think it was again due to kind of the foresight of senior management, positioning the company so it could sustain a downturn like that. And then being very humble as we dealt with clients and just telling them that here are the effects of what's going on in the world, but we'll get through it. And when we did, we came out much better than some of our competitors, including hedge funds and investment banks. And that, combined with the cultural aspects that I talked about, set us up to really grow. And we just grew, almost basically in a straight line up for a number of years. And it culminated, in the pictures that you're seeing with the IPO. And that was in 2017. And a couple of fun anecdotes about the IPO. The IPO actually coincided with our firm's annual offsite meeting. And I was part of the committee that year. And so I remember the night that the IPO priced, that was the first night of the offsite, and the CEO had pulled me over and said, "Hey, like our chairman and our CIO are coming back from the pricing, so they're going to enter the room and kind of like like a team entering to play for the Super Bowl. Let's really play that up." And it was really cool. They came in and they were high-fiving everybody because it had been a very successful pricing. And then the IPO went off the next day. And then 2 days later, I was lucky enough to be part of the group that went up to NASDAQ and rang the bell, which is actually, NASDAQ is a button. It's not actually a bell. The bell is the New York Stock Exchange. But anyway, one of the cooler days of my life, as you see in some of the pictures. And then after we rang the bell, we went down on the street in Times Square, and we're looking up at that picture that you're showing now, which was taken at the moment of ringing the bell. And I just thought, this is surreal. I thought two things. This is surreal, coming from where we did as a 60-person company, some 12 years before that. And the second thing I thought is, I wish that my mom could see this because she had passed by then. And, she was a dyed-in-the-wool New Yorker, and that would have just thrilled her to death. But really an unbelievable experience to share it with people who just so deserved it, because they were not only incredibly brilliant people, they're just good people, and they did things the right way.
So it seems like you had some of our offline discussions, you had mentioned about how the firm had navigated through, and you mentioned it here, you navigated through the tough times of the recession right around 08, 09.
Yeah.
And that set you up, or the firm was set up then by the leadership to successfully execute this IPO. And we don't see a lot of companies learn or behave rationally like that, right? We spoke of for instance, the most recent example of a firm that's a company that went public, different space, of course, in the consumer space, Allbirds, which is now unfortunately under threat of being delisted, right, from the NASDAQ because of just not being able to meet their obligations. And of course, the shareholders are not necessarily always forgiving if you're not able to meet those obligations. So you threw some excellent points at me about what should someone consider, because I know a couple of people who've toyed around with the idea of taking their firms public. But I think what you told me, it was pretty sage advice to avoid ending up in a situation like so many public companies do these days, where they're not able to maintain their financial standing. So if you could just kind of elaborate on that, and that's really, like I said, very sage, sound advice that I think a lot of people should hear.
Yeah. Well, I think first, and it's indicative of private equity, is that it's, for better or for worse, it's a pure meritocracy. And so you don't get to the point of considering going public unless you've demonstrated that you can earn money and return it to your investors. And so that's kind of a built-in, really substantive hurdle that you have to surmount in order to get to that point. But other things you have to consider are, number one, has there been a kind of demonstrated track record of making distributions to your investors even while you're a private company? That's something I think the investment bankers really emphasized. You want to set up that history and that precedent before you become a public company, and realize that you can't really pay a substantial dividend, or you have to raise one and then decrease it. They don't like that instability. So that's another factor. And I think also having the infrastructure to handle the stringent regulations surrounding any public company. And it's one of the main reasons why we've seen a decrease in the number of public companies over the past 20 years. And it's actually been cut in half. It used to be close to about 8,000 in the United States, and now it's hovering around the 4,000 company range. And a big part of that is just compliance with a ton of regulations like Sarbanes-Oxley. And so you need to, in advance, make sure you have the people and the resources that are able to meet those requirements. I mean, we literally had auditors on site almost every day. So that's kind of life as a public company, and you have to be prepared for that too.
And I mean, just to add on to that, as an engineer, I would think that companies that actually have genuine uniqueness or intellectual property in the space of product development also are going to be served better in the public market, as opposed to companies that are I mean, Allbirds is a commodity. They make sneakers. They're beautiful. They're really a gorgeous brand. I look at it also from a brander's eye. But certainly what is going to separate them from the powerhouses like Nike and Adidas, who also face challenges, right? Financial challenges all the time. But they're just big enough that they can make adjustments, and every slight adjustment seems to help them. Whereas Allbirds is still kind of small and finding out what it's like to be when you're swimming with the big fish. So that's excellent advice. And I think it's cautionary tale for so many people. And another question I had is, in terms of what Hamilton Lane is, if you could just go take a step back for the benefit of folks who are not familiar with Hamilton Lane, people like me who are not familiar with, as I think you commonly refer to it as like maybe a family practice type of organization, and what differentiates that in the world of all the investment lingo that's out there, or nomenclature.
Yeah. So I wouldn't refer to it as a family practice. There are family offices that manage wealth for ultra high net worth families, but Hamilton Lane is a financial advisory and management firm. And what it does is invest money on behalf of mostly institutions. So
Okay.
think of pension plans, union retirement funds, sovereign wealth funds, insurance companies, and invest that money only in the world of private equity and private credit. And that started out as a niche, back in the 1980s, and has grown steadily to now become, close to a $10 trillion industry. Now that's still relatively small compared to the public markets, which everybody knows about, but it's gaining more in prominence. And, again, Hamilton Lane has kind of ridden that wave, but has stood out because, it's also an excellent company. And so, it's, the private markets is kind of shifting more and more toward retail investors now. That's kind of the holy grail, and they're just beginning to kind of crack that code, in part because of what I talked about earlier. You've got fewer companies that are now public, and a lot of the stock market is driven by a handful of technology companies, whereas, there are multiple times the number of private companies in the US and globally. And so institutional and even retail investors are seeing I kind of like that diversification. I like the idea of having the ability to invest in thousands and thousands of companies rather than something that's driven by a small group of tech companies.
So after the firm went public, you were there some more years. You did well, and that brings us to the current chapter of your life, which is by doing well, now you're doing good. And so, before we get into the specific organizations, just give us kind of a broad understanding of, okay, why you kind of along this career trajectory made this change, and then we'll get into some of the specific initiatives that you're a part of or leading, that seem to carry the thread of doing good.
Yeah, so it was 2021, so it was 4 years after the IPO, and we were still doing the COVID thing, right? Working from home, and as like a lot of people in the world, I just thought, I want to start to think about the next steps in my life and my career, and thought, I would really like to start getting into teaching. And so I had fall in my lap an opportunity to take a position as an adjunct professor at Villanova Law School. And to me, that was kind of the sign that, I could do this part-time and continue to work, but I really want to kind of head in this other direction. And after 16 years at Hamilton Lane, decided to retire and start to pursue a number of different things, both in the academic world and in the nonprofit world. Because I just felt fortunate, the breaks I've been given, the family I was born into, the people who had taught me and coached me throughout my life. And I thought, I want to do some of that now for other people. And I think I can be like pretty decent at it.
So let's bring up one of the. I'll bring up a couple of websites that you're affiliated with the organization. So the first one I was going to do was this one, if that's okay, and you could
Sure.
perhaps maybe just give a little bit of background about what is Sensibility. And just a side note, it looks like our YouTube stream might not be active, in case anyone's messaging you or asking you where you are.
Okay.
It'll be on later, but for some reason the live part of it is not on, but it is on LinkedIn. So
okay. So Sensibility, I'm on the executive directors council of this nonprofit called Sensibility, and the mission there is to teach financial literacy to teens in New York City, and it's led by a gentleman named Roy Paul, as you see his picture there. And there are, I think, now 14 or 15 states that require financial literacy to be part of the public school curriculum. Some of those require it as a standalone course. Others require it as part of, kind of an economics course. But Sensibility, I think, recognizes that, I think there needs to be kind of a solution outside of the educational system as well, especially for kids in New York. And so, because it's kind of a cornerstone, for helping people, kind of get into a better situation socioeconomically. It's like, once they start to obtain money, how do you manage it, and what do you do with it, and how to appreciate it. So that's really the mission, and that just kind of resonated with me and had to cross over to, I'd been in the world of finance and thought I could contribute there.
So that also led you to, or whichever came first, but you've also started your own endeavor to be more hands-on, one-on-one, and more mentoring in the same space, if you don't mind, or also in terms of the legal aspect, using your legal background. So if you could just kind of touch base on this.
Sure, happy to. So I mentioned I had started teaching as an adjunct at Villanova Law School, and a little while after that became kind of an advisor and mentor at Fairfield University up in Connecticut. I simply just called them up one day and said, "Here's my background. I know you have a good business program. I'm wondering if you could use some help." And they said, "Sure." And so I became what's called a professional in residence there. And the more I thought about those two experiences at Villanova and Fairfield, I thought, why just limit this to those two institutions, as great as they are? I know plenty of people who have high school or college age kids who could use some kind of mentoring or coaching and guidance, especially if they're considering a career in business law or in business itself. And so I set up this entity called Tomorrow's Business and Legal Scholars to provide that. It's kind of private mentoring and coaching.
So do the people, do the obviously kids, right? To you and me at least, kids coming to you in this program, do they have any idea about what they want to do, or what's the mix of like people who might have some idea as opposed to no idea?
Yeah, it really runs the gamut. It's, yeah, kids who kind of directionally know, like, I want to do something business related, to others who are much more laser focused on either I want to go to law school or I want to be, an investment banker. So there's a pretty big dispersion there, which I kind of like, because you can kind of shape. It's not a scripted message. You can kind of shape the message according to the person. But what I always tell them is, you first want to check on yourself and what your personality is like, and what you like to do, what you think you're good at, and then let's see how that fits with the skills that are required to succeed in one of these two areas.
Okay. And if anyone has been listening very carefully, you could probably hear my dogs barking in the background, and that means that the next topic we're going to talk about is probably our favorite subject of next, even ahead of the Yankees, right? Is our
Yeah.
love for animals and specifically dogs. So please share this pretty cool experience that you've and organization that you've come across here and that you're a part of.
Yeah. So American Dog Society is a nonprofit that was just formed a couple of years ago in 2022. And I was invited to be a board member of the regional New York board. We've got a bunch of different regional boards throughout the country. And the mission of this nonprofit is to teach dog parents how to be better at doing that for dogs, how to be better in kind of training their dogs, raising their dogs. There are something like 3 million dogs per year that are either surrendered to shelters or just outright abandoned. And I think a decent number of that is attributable to the fact that people just get frustrated. Some of that is coming out of the pandemic, when people had gotten a lot of pets and then they had to go back into their real lives. Unfortunately, decided to get rid of their dogs. But a lot of it is attributable to people just getting frustrated because they don't know a lot about dog behaviors. And the idea is to train people to be better equipped to understand those things and then to deal with them. And if that's the case, they're more likely to keep the dog instead of getting rid of it.
So what I will do is for sure put all three of these links in my follow-up post, so that anyone who wants to, anyone that has a young student that might need mentoring, or anyone that wants to get involved in a program about financial literacy for our younger generation, or anyone that needs help or wants to help people who are managing their pet friends, can do that. And I appreciate that. And again, that really brings me to, full circle to where, I started this. So if you humor me with this, right, to be good and to do good is all we have to do. Probably no better advice has been given, or there's few examples of better advice than that, for ourselves. I know I'm still learning how to follow this practice. And I also share it with some of the folks I meet too. It kind of simplifies our lives, and I think that's kind of a path you've taken too, is simplified things, and focusing on what's important to you, which is, obviously if you can do it, folks out there, try to stay laser focused on doing what's important to you. it's going to be better for you, the folks around you, and your health and well-being too. Anthony, I didn't know if you wanted to share any last thoughts before we signed off here.
No, I just wanted to say again, thanks for having me. And, I'm kind of grateful not only for being here today to talk about a little bit about my story, but for the opportunity to have done all the things that I've done and to be in this position now. I just think that, you can't be thankful enough. And I just wanted to try to show that through some of the things that I'm doing now.
Excellent. Well, thank you for really, because this is taking a lot of time out of your day and a couple of days actually since we started this process. I appreciate it. It's great to get to know you even more from a non-sports perspective, and appreciate you sharing your career trajectory and the exciting experience of going through an IPO. Looking forward to maybe chatting again in the future. Folks out there, if you have an experience you want to share, please, message me here. And I will put this up on YouTube so it's available despite whatever the technology glitch was. But thank you again for your time, Anthony. Thanks everyone who joined in and watched this. And looking forward to sharing what my next topic will be probably in about 2 weeks or so. So thanks, and we'll see you next time.
Take care. Thanks again.